Hi, and welcome back to this week's Parsha Shir on Sefer or Gedalyahu. This week's Parsha begins with the commandment to Moshe and Aaron about the Para Aduma. The introductory words to the commandment of the Para Aduma, which was used to purify those who had contracted Tumas Meis, is Zos Chukas HaTorah Asher Tzivah Hashem Lemor. This is the Chukas HaTorah that Hashem had commanded, saying. And it goes on to describe the procedure of the paraduma, the necessity of the paraduma, and the whole concept of tumas meis. The word chukas haTorah, the chok of the Torah, is a complicated word. It's a complicated phrase. The word chok actually appears many times throughout the Torah, or chukas appears many times throughout the Torah, but often with different meanings, one case from the next. For example, chukas appears sometimes in the context of psukim, which are indicating that a particular mitzvah or particular practice has permanence to it. For example, in Parshat Bo, the Torah talks about the nature of Pesach, and it says, "V'haya hayom hazeh lachem lezikaron, v'chagosem oso chag laHashem, ledorosechem, chukas olam techaguhu." This day, the day of Pesach, should be for you a remembrance, and you should celebrate it as a chag laHashem, ledorosechem, for all generations into the future. And what is that called when you celebrate something for generations long into the future? Chukas olam. That is called a chok olam, a law of permanence. That's how you would translate chok, a law of permanence, something indicating the eternality of the practice, the everlasting nature of the practice. I think actually perhaps it's related to the fact that chok is a derivative of the word chakak, which means to engrave. When you engrave something, when you carve something out in stone, it becomes permanent. So to chok, like from the word chakuk, engraved, this law becomes engraved upon the history of the Jewish people, the future of the Jewish people. It becomes eternal, becomes permanent, becomes everlasting. And many times when this connotation of chok is used in the Torah, it's paired with the word olam, chok olam, chukas olam. That's one meaning of chok in the Torah. Another example of chok in the Torah appears actually in the story of Nadav and Avihu in Parshat Shmini. In the aftermath of the sin of Nadav and Avihu, Moshe says to Aaron and Elazar and Itamar, the two remaining sons of Aaron, that they have to eat from the kachim, they have to eat from the sacrifices. And he says, "V'achaltem osa b'makom kadosh," you should eat it in a holy place, "Ki chokcha v'chok banecha hi me'ishei Hashem, ki ken tzuvesi," because it's your chok. Here, chok doesn't mean a sense of permanence. So what does chok mean over here? Chok here means a portion, as Targum Onkelos translated chalak, right? V'techlun yate ba'atar kaddish, you should eat it in a holy place. Arei chalakach v'chalak banayichi. This is your chelek, this is your portion, this is your piece, and the piece of your children, the portion of your children. So chok can sometimes mean portion. When you get to our parsha, however, it doesn't seem to have either of those meanings, as other places in the Torah chok does. Here you can't say zos chukas haTorah, this is the portion of the Torah, that doesn't make sense. You can't say this is the permanence of the Torah, that doesn't make sense. In our context, chok has a different meaning. Chok here is a law, a statute, but there's a particular form that it takes here, as the Targum Onkelos translates, da gezeras oraisa. It translates chok as gezerah, a decree coming from the Torah, a decree coming from God. That's where we get the common understanding of chok, meaning a law that has no explanation, that has no reason or rationale to it, as we normally translate chok, from this context here of paraduma, where the Targum says it's a decree. We don't necessarily understand the decree, we don't know the reasons for the decree, we don't really get the details of the context of the decree, but it's a decree. It's declared by Hashem. And that's, of course, where the famous Medrash Tanchuma comes in, quoted by Rashi on this pasuk, where Rashi basically claims that this is the paradigmatic chok of the Torah, the paradigmatic, unexplicable law of the Torah. We don't understand the para aduma. We don't understand why it's needed at all, why you burn something, you slaughter an animal and burn it in order to purify someone who had contracted tumas meis, the impurity of the dead. How does killing something allow you to be metaher, to purify someone who had tumas meis. In addition, why does the Kohen who sprinkles the ashes of the para aduma on the person who's tameh himself become tameh, whereas at the very same time, the person who he's sprinkling it upon becomes tahor? The whole thing is inexplicable. It doesn't make any rational sense. That's why we categorize it as a chok. As Rashi says, Lefisha asatan v'umos ha'olam monimus Yisrael lomar ma mitzvah hazosu ma tam yeshba. Rashi, quoting the Medrash, says that the nations of the world would ridicule us for this mitzvah. What's the reason behind it? Why are you doing this? Lefichach kasav ba chukas. Therefore, the Torah categorizes here as a chok, so that we can have an answer to those umos ha'olam and say, Gezerahi milfanai, ein lecha rashus lahar harachara. It's a decree put upon me by God. We have no ability to question it because we don't understand it. No rationale was given to us, and therefore it can dispel those questions that people have. Rashi categorizes the paraduma as the classic chok of the Torah. However, even if you understand the word chukas or chok, different context of the Torah, and in our context here of Parshat Chukas and the Para Aduma, there is still one question that the Mefarshim ask, and that is why the pasuk says Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is the chok of the Torah, and goes on to describe the Para Aduma. It should have said Zos Chukas HaPara. Here are the laws, the inexplicable laws, the decrees of the Para Aduma. Or at least it should have said, Zos chukas tumas meis. This is the chok, this is the inexplicable decree or law of God surrounding impurity of death, and go on to describe the process of the paraduma. Why does it categorize it at chukas haTorah, the chok of the Torah as a whole, when it should have only categorized it as the chok of this particular mitzvah, the mitzvah of the paraduma? And the Gedalyahu addresses himself very beautifully, very succinctly, in a short passage to this question. He says, "The hakavana hi shekol mitzvah b'Torah yeshla inyan miyuchad." He says every mitzvah in the Torah has a particular angle to it that is unique to it. It is wholly infused with that nekuda, with that special point. Ikar nekuda shel ha-mitzvah. It's the essence of a mitzvah. V'nekuda zo higam b'shar ha-mitzvos. However, you have to understand that nekuda, that point, that trait of this mitzvah is actually a part of every other mitzvah as well. Only elosha mitzvahs mitzvah achas miyuchedes hi le'inyan zeh bilvad. Rather, it's not that the trait doesn't exist in other mitzvahs, it's that the trait exists most characteristically in this mitzvah, more characteristically than in any other mitzvah. So, for example, in this case, para aduma is, its angle, its nekuda is that it's a chok, it's an inexplicable law. So, it is most seen as the inexplicable law. That doesn't mean that there isn't an aspect of chok in other mitzvos. There are. However, the most defined case of a chok is the para aduma. He gives a mashal to try to understand this. A mashal is a hadrasha ala pasuk ushmartem et hamatzos. In Parshas Bo, it says you're supposed to guard the matzos. Rabbi Shaya Omer ati yikor et hamatzos ela hamitzvos. There's a play on the word here in the pasuk, say Chazal, that you're supposed to guard the matzos so they don't become chametz. However, really the implication is not only you should guard the matzos, mem tzadi vav taf, but the mitzvos, mem tzadi vav vav taf. Kederch she'ein machmitzin es ha-mitzvah et ha-matzos, kach ein machmitzin es ha-mitzvos. As Rashi quotes on the pasuk. Just like you can't allow the matzah to become chametz, so too you can't allow all mitzvos to become chametz. Hainu, what that means is the ikar ha-nekuda shel mitzvahs matzah, he has rizus be'asiyasa shelo tavo lidei chimutz. The essential core value of matzah, the salient feature of the mitzvah of matzah, is the zrizus that's necessary. It's the quickness that's necessary. V'darshinan, but the drasha on the pasuk teaches us sheyesh inyan shel zrizus be'asiyas kol ha-mitzvos. That yes, it's most salient here in the mitzvah of matzah, but it's actually a characteristic of all mitzvahs. We have the principle, mitzvah habaliyatcha al takmitzena. You shouldn't allow any mitzvah that comes your way to become chametz, to wait too long. You should have the alacrity to perform it. V'chein yesh lomar le'inyan mitzvahs para aduma. That's exactly the point here in the case of para aduma. Shechoki, which is categorized as a chok, an inexplicable decree. Ula mahala mahasaga sa'adam, it's above any rationale of human beings. K'moshe Amar Shlomo HaMelech, keshabikesh legalish tam shel para aduma. Al pi medrash, we believe Shlomo HaMelech was trying to figure out the reason for para aduma. He's the smartest man that lived, and he couldn't figure it out, which is why he says in Kohelet, Amarti achakma v'hi rechoka mimeni. I said, I thought I was so smart, but this thing is too far from me. Chazal say that's a reference to para aduma, which he couldn't understand. Shizohi nikuda shel mitzvah shechoki. It's the nikuda. It's the salient feature of this mitzvah of para aduma is that it's a chok. It's that it's irrational. That it's a decree from God with no reason. However, nikuda zo yesh gam bechol hamitzvos. But that aspect of being inexplicable actually exists in every other mitzvah as well. Yes, there are many other mitzvahs in the Torah which are more explicable. We have the mitzvah of Pesach, because we want to celebrate freedom, because we want to celebrate the forming of our nation. That makes perfect sense rationally, but at the end of the day, why do we do Pesach that way? Why is it that particular amount of days? Why is the Korban brought in this way? There's always an inexplicable aspect to every mitzvah. You could take another mitzvah which makes perfect sense. The mitzvah of Zachor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. Shamor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. The mitzvah of Shabbos, it's explicitly said in the Torah. Why do we celebrate the rest, the menucha of Shabbos? Because God rested on the seventh day. So of course it makes sense rationally why we would have a Shabbos, but then you realize to yourself there's also an angle of Shabbos that's inexplicable. Okay, I understand. I have to rest because God rested. But why did God rest? And even if we understand why God rested, why do I have to rest by ceasing malacha? Why can't I rest by going to the beach? There's always an inexplicable aspect to every mitzvah, and that's what's being taught to us in this pasuk. When the Torah says, Zo Chukas HaTorah, this is the inexplicable decree of, it doesn't say of the para aduma, because the concept is not limited to para aduma. It's trying to teach us through the mitzvah, whose salient feature is the inexplicable decree, that actually every mitzvah of the Torah has an angle to it that is also inexplicable. And that is a core principle, says the Gedalyahu, that the Torah is trying to convey here in our parsha. And it's a critical point for us to understand, for us to realize. All too often we try to rationalize the mitzvahs. In fact, Chazal struggled with this. The Gemara says there's a machlokas, darshinan time in the kra, lo darshinan time in the kra. Can you attribute reasons or rationales to mitzvahs at all? And of course, the reason why the Gemara is wondering about this is because it's a very dangerous endeavor. As soon as you start to attach rationale to mitzvahs, not only will people say, okay, well, once that rationale is gone, I don't have to keep the mitzvah anymore, but even worse than that, even when they are keeping the mitzvah, even when the rationale is applicable, people will start to keep the mitzvah simply because of the reason, because of the rationale, rather than because Hashem commanded it. And if you forget that mitzvahs are commandments of Hashem, they're obligations brought forth to us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you forget the notion of chiyuv, of obligation, of commandedness, of the hierarchy of the relationship of us and God, then you can keep all the mitzvahs of the Torah and you would have missed the essential point. And we do this all the time. You hear people speak very beautifully about mitzvahs that they love. And this is a separate shir. People should love mitzvahs. People should delight in mitzvahs. It's a wonderful thing. And even attributing reasons to mitzvahs is a beautiful thing. It attaches people to their message, to the whole mode of it. But for some people, it becomes the be-all and end-all of the mitzvah. So much so that when it stops being meaningful for them, they stop practicing the mitzvah altogether. And that is something which is dangerous, because that misses the core point. The core point is that they may do good things for us. We may enjoy these mitzvahs, but at the end of the day, the reason why we do them is very simple. It's a decree from Hashem. It may make a little more sense than the para aduma, but the pasuk of the para aduma teaches us that just like the para aduma is totally a chok, there's an aspect of chok in every other mitzvah as well. There's an aspect of decree from Hashem, an inexplicable aspect to every other mitzvah of the Torah. And we have to have the humility to understand that as human beings, we are limited in our perception. We are limited in our understanding. of the mitzvahs. We can't possibly delve to the depth of every mitzvah. We can think that we have a reason for it. We can think that we found meaning in it. But at the core of it, the end of the day, all it is a commandment from Hashem. And that's the important piece to take away with us. It's actually the same point about life as a whole. We have to have the humility as human beings to realize that we don't always understand life. We don't always understand the events of the world. We don't even always understand ourselves, the way we think, the way we behave, the way our body works. We are limited in our capacity to fully understand things, and in every angle, and in every moment, every experience of life, and every mitzvah, there is always an aspect that we possibly don't understand. There's always an aspect that's beyond us, and we have to have the humility to recognize that in order to recognize our place vis-a-vis God, in order to recognize the commandedness that comes through the realm of Torah and mitzvos, which ultimately keeps us connected to Hashem in a very special, very unique relationship. We should all enjoy our mitzvos. We should find meaning in them. We should attribute rationale and reason to them. But always remind ourselves that ultimately the reason why we do it is because Hashem chose us to be commanded. Hashem chose us to have this very special relationship where we get to fulfill the dictates which He asks of us. And as we know from our human relationships, whenever you fulfill the request of another person in the human realm, it breeds a closeness, it breeds a tightness, it breeds a trust and a reliance and a relationship that, if fostered, becomes unbreakable. And that's exactly what we try to achieve with Hashem through the commandedness of our mitzvahs. Shabbat Shalom.